Everybody. My name is Russ McGurk. I'm president of GoRail. So good afternoon to everybody. Good morning to those dialing in from the West Coast. Welcome to today's webinar. We've exceeded the maximum capacity of a Microsoft Teams meeting, which is limited to 1,000 people. So for those who weren't able or aren't able to chime in for this, we'll be making a recording available to everybody who would like it. We got a great program lined up to discuss round 2 of the Federal Railroad Grade Crossing Elimination Grant Program, which dispensed $570 million for projects impacting over 400 crossings in 32 states in the program's first year. We'll be hearing directly from FRA about how the program works, key eligibility requirements, opportunity for round 2. We'll also have a case study in which we'll hear from individuals who successfully navigated the process in the first round. And with that, let me just introduce and thank each of our presenters today. We have Jennifer Stewart, who is Sponsor Outreach Specialist, Regional Outreach and Project Delivery, Office of Railroad Development at the Federal Railroad Administration. Santiago Cruz Roveda, Supervisor, Project Sponsor Outreach, Office of Regional and Project Delivery, FRA. Nick Walny, Director of Community Development and Zoning, Village of Franklin Park, Illinois. Jill Kramer, who is a Senior Transportation and Environmental Planner with Jacobs Engineering. Jesse Elam, Director of Strategic Planning and Policy for the Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways. And finally, Mr. Larry Lloyd, who is Senior Director of U.S. Government Affairs at Canadian Pacific Kansas City Railway. Just stage setting a little bit. In any given year, American railroads carry about 1.4 billion tons of freight across a vast interconnected rail network spanning almost 140,000 miles. Now, with more than 200,000 grade crossings nationwide, railroads work closely with local community leaders like those joining us today, government officials and first responders to manage and mitigate impacts at those crossings and keep the public and rail employees safe. And the RCE program, coming into its second round, is a key part of that collaboration between FRA, railroads, and communities to accomplish these shared goals. Before we get going, just a couple housekeeping items. If you'd like to ask a question, please click the Q&A button at the top of your screen, and that will pop up the Q&A module on the right, and you can type your question in there. We'll try to get to everyone, but it might not be possible just given the sheer number of participants and time constraints. Anyhow, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Santi to kick things off for FRA. Take it away, Santi.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
You guys can hear me? Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for your time. My name is Dr. Santiago Cruz Roveda, and also I'd like to introduce Jennifer Stewart, and we'll be doing a brief presentation about the Rail Crossing Elimination Program. But let me quickly share our screen. Can you guys see the screen in front of you?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, Jennifer, do you mind briefly introducing yourself to the team here as well?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are, everybody. I'm Jennifer Stewart, Sponsor Outreach Specialist at FRA, and I'm glad we could be here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Looking forward to the conversation today. So we'll get right into the presentation. The Railroad Development Vision and Goal. This is the new vision of the RRD office. As everyone is aware, FRA has completed a new realignment, and we have been doubling in size and hiring quite a bit of folks across the country. So FRA's mission is to enable the safe, reliable, and efficient movement of people and goods for a strong America now and in the future. So within FRA, there is a division called the Railroad Development Division, which is where Jennifer and myself are at. And within RRD, we have 3 goals and outcomes. One of them is rail safety and resilience, so enhancing community safety in rail networks, upgrading short-line railroad infrastructure, safe grade crossings in connected neighborhoods. The second one is passenger rail developments, so it's new and enhanced corridors across the US and improving the accessibility, customer experience, and reliability. And then the last one is program innovation and capacity, so providing a more user-friendly program with tools and guidance, which is what we're doing today. So as part of the new bipartisan infrastructure law, we have approximately $66 billion available of funding from fiscal year 22 through fiscal year 26. Within that $66 billion, $3 billion was set aside for the railroad crossing elimination. And this is a new program that came out of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we'll be discussing a little bit more about RCE today in our brief presentation. Many of you know about CRISI and Fed State Partnership, as well as the Corridor ID program, which is not on here, but those are also other programs that are part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. So, what is the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program? This slide provides a really wonderful high-level overview of the program. The purpose of RCE is to fund highway rail or pathway rail grade crossing improvement projects that focus on improving the safety and mobility of people and goods. We always tell folks to please read the NOFO as it comes out. So the previous NOFO, there was a selection made in June 5th, 2023, and 63 projects were selected, totaling $571 million across 32 states. The difference between RCE and the other programs at FRA is we actually do provide the list of all of the applicants that were awarded and all of the applicants that applied to the program as well. That is part of this the information and statute that is per law for RCE. So if you go to the RCE website for FRA, you will be able to see both applicants that got awarded and applicants that submitted applications and were not selected. The upcoming NOFO, we'll talk about the timeline a little later with Jennifer, but we did provide a new updated timeline, and the RCE NOFO is coming out in mid to late June, so around the corner here, with approximately $1.1 billion available, and $38 million of that will be for planning projects, and around $229 million for projects in rural communities or tribal lands. As stated on the right-hand side, the eligible projects is basically grade separation or closure, including a bridge, embankment, tunnel, or combination thereof, as well as planning, environmental review, and design of eligible project types. The information can be found on the NOFO when it comes out and also within the FRA website. And with that, I will hand it over to Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Santi. All right, so to give everyone a quick snapshot of what was funded during the last solicitation, the RCE program funded a total of 63 projects in 32 states. Of those projects, 15 were rural projects in 10 different rural areas. And this is just a few examples of the types of projects that we funded during the last solicitation cycle. Okay. And as Santi mentioned earlier, this is the updated 2024 discretionary grant calendar. As you can see here, the CRISI NOFO has already been released, and actually the closing date for applications under that program ended just on the 28th, so yesterday. RCE will be coming out soon. There will be a 75-day window to submit applications. And almost concurrently with that, Fed State Partnership Northeast Corridor NOFO will be released. 60 days to apply for funding under that program. Fed State Partnership National will be coming out the end of September, beginning of October, a 75-day window. And then Restoration and Enhancement NOFO will be coming out soon as well, and there'll be a 75-day window to apply for funding under that program. Again, those are all estimated timelines, so it is a moving target. So it's always good to check our website to make sure that, you know, you're aware when those notices of funding availabilities are finally out. This is really kind of a cool interactive tool that FRA has put together. And so we'll kind of give you an example of how this works. But basically, any potential project sponsor can come to this tool, kind of go through the steps that we'll walk through here real quickly and help them identify which program to apply for under FRA to achieve the results or achieve the project for which they need funding for. So Santi, if you just go ahead and click on the link. And you might have to reshare your screen. There we go. Okay, so this is on our website. And so literally it's just a step-by-step tool that project sponsors can use. And so just to do a quick demonstration of this, you just start by, you know, identifying what type of entity you are. So we'll go ahead for this example and select political subdivision of a state. So that would mean a city, county, town, local government. So we'll go ahead and click on that one.
It's acting up, Jennifer.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. Oh, here it is. Okay, got it.
Oh, here it is. Okay. So if you'll click on what type of entity you are, and then you select what type of funding you're looking for. So if it's capital, operating, research, so on and so forth. So for this example, we'll select capital. And then it'll ask you to identify the type of project that you're interested in. And for the example here, which is what a lot of people apply for funding under, is for grade separation or closure types of projects. So if you scroll almost all the way down, you'll see grade separation or closure. We'll select the next button, and it'll identify that, you know, the RCE program would be the type of program for which your project would be eligible for funding. And at that point, recipients would be directed to the NOFO to get additional information and the specifics about the program eligibility, applying for the funds, so on and so forth. So that's just a quick little tool for recipients to use if they're not familiar with the FRA programs. Additional resources also include, of course, FRA has all of our grant programs on our website. The NOFO, the nice thing that we do is every time there is a NOFO released, FRA hosts webinars to go over the NOFO with potential project sponsors. Often the first webinar is live, so given time and ability, attendees can ask questions, so on and so forth, and then those are recorded and put on our website. So if you're not able to attend the live session, you can go back and rewatch it via a recorded webinar. And last but not least on this, of course, is just information as it relates to the FRA under the bipartisan infrastructure law legislation. And all of that's on our website. And last but not least, if you have specific questions under the RCE program, we would direct you to either Jenny Zhang, who is the RCE program manager for FRA, and or her office also has this kind of generic sponsor outreach email address, FRA-NOFO-support@dot.gov. And I think that sums it up for us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you both very, very much. Betsy, who's next?
Next, we were going to kick it off to Nicholas from Franklin Park Village to start sort of the case study portion of the program and talk about why the village applied for the grant. So we'll start it off there. Thanks, Nicholas. Oh, let me
Great.
load your slides. Okay, is everyone seeing this?
All right. Yep, I see it.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, good morning to everybody. Good afternoon as well. Thank you, GoRail, for having me, and thank you to the FRA for selecting and supporting our project in Franklin Park. So I'd like to kick things off with a story of Franklin Park and how we began the process of submitting a successful grant application for the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program. For some context of those of you who are not familiar with Franklin Park, Illinois, we are located northwest of Chicago, southeast of O'Hare International Airport, third largest city in the U.S. and one of the busiest airports in the world. We have a population just over 18,000 and a median household income just over 70,000. We got a pretty diverse population, multiple languages spoken at home, predominantly Spanish, English, and Slavic. And being that we are located directly adjacent to the airport, we have a large manufacturing, transportation, and logistics sector. And then, of course, according to the Chicago Metropolitan Area Agency for Planning, the Chicago metro area is the country's premier freight hub, with approximately 1/4 of all freight trains and 1/2 of all intermodal trains in the country passing through our region. Next slide, please. So zooming in, you can see how close we are to the airport. Our large industrial areas, the Kansas City Pacific, the Canadian Pacific Kansas City Schiller Park Container Yard, and the CPKC Bensonville Intermodal Rail Terminal, which is the largest rail yard for the company in the Chicagoland area. Franklin Park has a total of 7 at-grade rail crossings. One of them leads into the container yard, and 6 of those crossings head into the intermodal terminal. Next slide, please. So on both sides of the rail line and the rail yard, we have single-family homes, industrial uses, transportation uses, commercial, multifamily, parks, and institutional uses such as schools and government buildings. Next slide, please. And because of our location to the Bensonville Intermodal Rail Terminal, the bottleneck on the east side of the rail yard, and the prevalence of long trains, extensive delays are frequent when trains enter and exit the rail yard. These delays divide the village in half. When the train gates are down, it is lost time for business and freight, motorists, emergency responders, cyclists, and pedestrians. Key locations such as schools and downtown businesses become inaccessible if you're on the wrong side of the tracks. Next slide, please. So therefore, because of these persistent delays that we've experienced over the years, back in 2014, the village commissioned CH2M Hill, which is now known as Jacobs Engineering, to conduct a feasibility study of a new railroad grade separation. The study provided several recommendations for alternatives of varying locations as to where and how a grade separation could be built. The resulting conclusions and recommendations were meant to guide the next step in the process of implementing a design solution that addressed the village's safety and transportation issues. Next slide, please. And then from that point, once that feasibility study was complete, we began starting to collect data. For several years, the village police department collected data on train stoppages. Village employees, police staff, citizens, businesses were encouraged to call the police department whenever there was a long train stoppage. And as you can see from the snapshot of the data collected at the 25th Avenue Rail Crossing, there was a total of 71 stoppages just called in. These are just called in from January 23 to March 23, with an average stop time of 35 minutes long, with the longest stoppage time being almost 2 hours. So definitely, if you get stopped by the train, it could derail your day. And then the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning also conducted their own study. Oh, next slide, please. Thank you. conducted their own study and was gracious enough to share their data with the village. From May 31st, 2022 to June 22nd, 2022, the crossing at 25th Avenue was blocked 22% of the time from long trains, the Metro commuter train, and false activations. And in addition to traffic backups, this downtime also prevented commuter access to the Metro train, as we do not have a pedestrian underpass or overpass in the village. Next slide, please. So in addition to collecting data, we started taking pictures of what this gridlock did on the village, especially at the 25th Avenue grade crossing, because that's our main crossing in town. And as you can see from the picture, all modes of transportation are stuck waiting for the train to pass. Providing pictures with your grant application is crucial. It gives you real life examples as to what your municipality is facing on a daily basis. Next slide, please. And unfortunately, we also have examples of students going through and under rail cars to get to the other side of the tracks. Luckily in this instance, no one got hurt, but these are the types of situations that citizens face on a daily basis. In addition to taking pictures and utilizing cameras for evidence, it helps paint your story. Slide. So after years of collecting data, conducting a feasibility study, taking pictures, and utilizing village technology to collect evidence, the village received word that the Biden administration announced more than $573 million in available funding for the new railroad crossing elimination program. And as soon as that was announced, we got to work. Village engineering, planning staff, we reviewed the NOFO to determine if we were eligible. We then reached out to Jacobs Engineering, formerly CH2M Hill, to see if they could assist us with preparing and submitting a grant application for the program, as they previously conducted the feasibility study and have had considerable experience with these types of applications. At the same time, we began to have conversations with the Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways and the Illinois Commerce Commission regarding matching fund commitments and support for the project. Both agencies were extremely generous with their support for the project and elected to contribute nearly 20% of the matching funds, with $1 million coming from Cook County and $800,000 coming from the ICC. And simultaneously, as that was going on, we were seeking support from the local rail operator, CPKC. Without support from them, the project would have difficulty moving forward if we were to get approved. CPKC listened, understood the urgent need for a grade separation, indicated their support, and have been a willing project partner to date. So once we garnered the matching fund commitments, support from KC, and identified a firm to assist with the grant application, village staff started reaching out to legislative representatives, state and regional agencies, local transportation agencies, and local units of government for letters of support, which is crucial for the success of the grant application, as the project will directly and indirectly affect all these players for years to come. And that's it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Nicholas. We will hand it off now to Jill Kramer of Jacobs Engineering to discuss that aspect of the application.
Thank you. So yes, the Village of Franklin Park is facing challenges that many communities adjacent to major freight and intermodal terminals confront, and that is extended delays at rail crossings through the heart of their towns. When this occurs, village and pedestrian movement is stopped, creating safety issues for school children who must cross the tracks to get to schools, delays for commuters trying to catch trains, delays for motorists accessing downtown businesses, and delays for freight forwarders trying to get their goods to market, including the area's intermodal and cargo facilities. The structured process that the village followed to develop its successful grant application is illustrated here on this slide. As Nick mentioned, it was a process that began before the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the RCE program was published. The 2014 Crossing Feasibility Study, answered if there are viable grade separation solutions to mitigate the safety concerns and address delays. And it also established that defined scope for the project and the understanding of the problems to be addressed. As Nick mentioned, the village has worked very hard to cultivate project partnerships with the CPKC Railroad, sister agencies such as Cook County, who you will hear from in a minute, as well as CMAP, the regional MPO, to understand regional priorities and how this project would fit within those regional priorities. In addition to, as Nick shared, the rich data sets that provided insights into the travel patterns on both the rail as well as the roadway network. These early steps helped the village develop a project that would be a win-win for everyone. Improving the movement of goods on the rail network, improving the movement of goods on the road network, including from nearby industrial centers, improving emergency response times across the village, as well as eliminating conflicts between the rail and roadway users. Once that notice of funding opportunity was published, the multidisciplinary team of engineers, planners, economists, and communication professionals immediately got to work on developing a compliance matrix based on a very careful review of that notice of funding opportunity to track all of the program requirements and to ensure as a back check that each one of the requirements was addressed in the application. The team also worked to reassess the transportation system from the 2014 study to reflect 2022 conditions, as well as to understand how industry trends would impact the future, such as the merger at the time of the CP and Kansas City Southern. It was out for review at the time of the last application. The team carefully followed the recommended analyses identified in the NOFO, such as using data from FRA's grade deck tool, the National Risk Index, and other sources that are articulated in the NOFO to calculate the safety benefit of the project using standardized objective safety metrics and data. The team also calculated the reduction in vehicle delay, benefits to the area's economic opportunity zones, emission benefits, among others, with the goal of being able to provide specific evidence of how the project would meet each one of the criteria outlined in the program. For example, related to the criteria of equity and community cohesion, that is the removal of barriers to opportunity. The grant team assessed the impacts and benefits to the area's underserved communities. We were able to leverage streetlight origin destination data, and we learned that 86% of the vehicle trips that cross the tracks and begin and end within a 1 mile radius of the project area are made to and from Justice 40 historically disadvantaged communities. At the time, the village was also considering applying for the CRISI grant program in addition to the RCE program. This was in the fall of 2022. And so although a US DOT compliant benefit cost analysis was only required for the CRISI program, which was at that time anticipated to open on the heels of the RCE program, the team prepared a BCA during the development of the RCE grant application. And the benefit cost analysis provided information on the monetized dollar value of the expected outcomes of the project in terms of improved safety, equitable economic growth, improved environmental outcomes, all aligned with the program's evaluation criteria. As Nick mentioned, the grant team worked hand in hand with village staff to tell the story of the project and the community in the application. While the grant team was busy working on quantifying the benefits, reduced emissions from idling vehicles, improved sustainability from improving the flow of traffic, improved emergency response time, improved access and foot traffic to downtown businesses, improved supply chain fluidity, and the creation of jobs, just to name a few, As Nick mentioned, the village staff was working hard to mobilize support from elected officials and partners as project champions with those funding commitments and through letters of support. Additionally, the team worked with staff to complete all the necessary forms describing the project scope, schedule, budget, clearly describing in the application how the village would implement and manage the project, as well as the measures that would be used to assess the project's performance into the future. The grant team established a schedule that would allow for adequate review time, as well as uploading the application to the grants.gov site early. And this was good, as it allowed us to troubleshoot when staff weren't able to access the grants.gov site. We learned that an organization can only have one authorized representative, and another department had already established itself as the authorized representative. So, having that time cushion gave us a time that we needed to engage the authorized representative and get the application material submitted on time. So on the next slide, in summary, the best practices employed in development of the grant application included starting early, developing a project scope, detailed analyses, engaging project supporters before the notice of funding opportunity is released, aligning the project to the evaluation and selection criteria, and providing evidence for how the project meets each one of those criteria, telling the story of the project and the community in the narrative, and submitting that grant application early so that if you do run into any problems when uploading to the grants.gov website, you have time to troubleshoot.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. And everyone, just so you know, type your questions into the Q&A feature, and we will pose them to all the panelists at the end of the program. Next, I'm going to hand it off to Jesse Elam of Cook County to discuss sort of the county perspective on this project.
Sure. Thanks.
Jesse.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Well, I'm happy to be here today. Thank you for having me to the GoRail organizers. I am Jesse Elam. I'm the Planning and Policy Director at Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways. We are a financial partner in this project, as you've already heard. So first off, about Cook County, we are the second largest U.S. county by population, just after LA County, and shortly ahead of Harris County. We in Texas, one of our sort of fundamental jobs is to maintain the county highway network, but we also have a more general mandate to improve transportation options for residents more generally, including walking, biking, transit, and maybe most relevant to this webinar, to help support the Chicago area's role as the freight hub of North America. This is really the only place in North America where all 6 major Class 1 railroads come together. Get lots of train activity, particularly concentrated in certain areas of our county and the region. And so there's lots of potential conflicts with highway users at grade highway rail crossings. And then on top of that, there's all the potential community issues with noise, vibration, blocked crossings, and so on. So it's an important thing from a policy perspective for County Department of Transportation and Highways to be engaged in. Now, Franklin Park is right in the middle of that freight hub, and they have all the issues that I've talked about. And after going through that feasibility study that Nicholas mentioned, they did approach the county about pursuing funding for Christie and for the RCE program, and for the county to be a financial partner in that. So we have pre-existing relationships with county officials, or they had pre-existing relationships with county officials, I should say. So, I mean, don't overlook, for those of you who are taking notes on how this project went down and how we put together the partnership and got the grant application and the funding in. Having those pre-existing relationships is very important. So you don't want to be looking for friends when you need a friend. You want to be looking for them when you don't yet. We also have a history of funding partnerships. This is not the only community that we've worked with, and we've, as a matter of fact, worked with Franklin Park many times. One of the ways that we do those partnerships is, and maybe this is a bit unusual for a county, we have an annual grant program, about $8.5 million that we administer to help communities with transportation projects. And we call that Invest and Cook. So that's one of the ways that we take in sort of local priorities and sort of filter them and decide what's most important to invest in. And that's been a very successful model. It's in fact been so successful that we're starting to branch out and do different grant programs that are focused beyond transportation, like doing water and sewer and general public works projects for communities. We call that Build Up Cook. So this has been something that we think makes a lot of sense. I mean, our county as a county, you know, at the administration level and at the level of our board president, has decided that one of the most important things we could be doing is helping to meet local needs, of which there are many. We ended up committing $1 million in match for the Connect Franklin Park project. The size of that commitment is really, the size of any commitment to any financial partnership project is really more of an art than a science. Has more to do, has to do with the amount needed, what other partners are contributing, the overall importance of the project, what kind of commitments have already been made, what the give is in your program. But in general, in going through this kind of sort of internal analysis about what to invest in, we're looking to help with local projects that are on our priority lists as well, because they would have larger or regional impacts that Nicholas was getting to. So we do that for bike trail projects, we do that for transit projects, do it for freight projects, and in this case, we do it for grade separation projects. Now, one of the ways that we're helped out in that is that in particular with grade separations, there's a priority list that was developed by CMAP, and that's our MPO. They've been mentioned already, and so they do a semi-regularly updated priority list that's really meant to determine the most important places in the region to do grade separations, and I think it currently has 47 projects on it. It may change. Some may go up or down in priority as different factors become more important. So at any rate, currently it's based on delay, constructability, safety, and so on. And that's one of the ways that we, as a region, sort of coordinate on what we think our shared consensus priorities are. And so let me just talk a little bit about other ways the county helps and would like to help. So even beyond just the Connect Franklin Park project with the RCE program, we have helped in other ways. And I mention this stuff because it might get some of you on the webinar thinking about ways to form these partnerships, who can do specifically what as part of those partnerships. So the obvious way is to go in as a financial partner in a project for another level of government or another community, maybe an adjacent community, to come in on the project and provide cash match. Other things being equal, DOT is usually going to look at a project with more partners involved as a better project. And then for that matter, you know, the FRA is generally going to want to see railroad support and participation. That is one of the technical merit criteria for RCE. And then when we're doing this, for this project and for others, we're usually trying to keep the federal ask significantly below the maximum 80%, if at all possible, because having more match helps, again, other things being equal. So bringing in partners who can bring that federal ask down makes it easier to squeeze a project in. Another thing that can be done outside of just being a financial partner or providing cash match is just providing a consultant to put together the application. Now, that's not how it was done here. That was self-funded by Franklin Park. But we have done other partnerships where we just provided the consultant to actually do the federal discretionary grant application. I think if you, one takeaway maybe from listening to Jill talk about what they did is that it can be pretty intense to actually put together one of these applications, depending on what it is. It can also be costly. And so for another level of government to just, who maybe has a consultant on retainer or has a task order contract, to just offer those services to help get something, to get a grant application pulled together, that can be very helpful. And I think as Jill mentioned, this unlike lots of other federal discretionary grants, RCE doesn't require cost benefit analysis. That actually does make it a little bit easier to do. It can make the application cheaper and cut costs for consultants. But also it's probably because grade separations often tend to have a pretty low benefit cost ratio given how expensive they are. And then I guess one other option here is to directly do part of a project if there's an element that can be done by another agency, such as one that we did in the village of Maywood, where there was a water sewer project that required some repaving that was on county jurisdiction road. We were able to help out with that project, and that was able to be counted as match. So all in all, when you're looking for these partnership projects, it's ends up being subject to funding and staff capacity. That's particularly the case for the county. That could vary from year to year. How much wiggle room do you have in your program that you could bring additional financial resources to the table? It can be tight some years and not so tight in other years. So it really is something that the stars to some degree kind of have to align. So I hope that this has been helpful. I mean, we were very happy to support this important project in the village of Franklin Park. I think for everyone else here, this is really a game in which you need to have the technical analysis right, but you also need to make sure that you're bringing your electeds, talking to the state DOT, finding any partners you can who will write letters of support to help your project get over the finish line.
Great, thank you so much, Jesse. Last but not least, I'm going to turn it over to Larry Lloyd from CPKC, which was the partner railroad for this project. Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, thank you, Betsy. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Go ahead. Okay. Thank you guys so much for letting me be on this call. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a really fun call to be on because I'm participating with a lot of great partners that CPKC has in the Chicagoland area and has worked with on numerous projects. So this is kind of an all in the family call, which is fun and exciting to be a part of. I would also say, branching off of that CPKC is a really big fan of the RCE grant program and what the FRA has done with it. It's certainly a program that we've spent a lot of time with the FRA on discussing and making sure we understand really well and in depth from a railroad perspective. And we highlight it to a lot of communities across the network as a potential partnership area where we can work on some of our block crossing and crossing safety issues across the network. And one of the main reasons why it's really great program, I'd say there's two components to it. The first one, and this really plays into the Franklin Park component, is the emphasis that the FRA puts on for having a corridor approach for a grant application, so that you're not, in a sense, with blinders on, just looking at one crossing, but you really are trying to look at, Franklin Park's sense, you've got 7 crossings, but your community maybe that has 3 or 4 crossings that are affected by railroad operations, and you're reviewing why the railroad is affecting each crossing in a certain situation, and if we are able to close a crossing here or do a grade separation here, how does that affect the railroad operations? And the reason that we like that from a railroad perspective is that allows us to also look holistically at our railroad operations across that corridor and really provide a lot of input back to the community on, hey, I know you think you want to do a grade separation here, but actually maybe if you did it at this location and you considered maybe tweaking this, you would actually have an even better benefit and have higher mitigation value in terms of our operations as well. So I think that corridor component is important. And then building off of that is also the funding stream that the RC allows for planning grants. So again, with the Franklin Park component, Nicholas did a great job of outlining our long history. The Bensenville Rail Yard has been here for 108 years. So there's a lot of railroading history in the area and a lot of changes in railroading operations. There's also a lot of just, if you were to look at that slide again, there's a lot of natural constraints about the way the tollway crosses the rail yard, the way Union Pacific crosses the railroad, that really limits our ability to have railroad operations efficiently move through the area. Now we're doing some things on our own long-term in partnership with the Tollway and Cook County and other entities to fix that. But there was a lot of constraints that we had in our ability to conduct railroad operations. And Nicholas did a great job of outlining what some of that spillover effects was on the community. So going back to this idea of having a planning grant and a corridor ID, I'm relatively new to CPKC, so I've been here getting on close to 3 years now, and by the way, I'm coming to you from Franklin Park. I'm sitting in an office in Franklin Park, so we have a pretty good understanding of what the railroad operations look like in the area, and really, I think, spent a lot of time with some of our senior ops folks really reviewing how our operations were impacting at each crossing. We did a really systematic evaluation internally on how we conduct operations and said, is there any margin for us to do a little bit of something here, a little bit of something there that would help mitigate some of these block crossing issues? The other component that plays into this is we also share a lot of this network with Metra, with the public transit area here too. So you've got a whole nother railroad player that's operating, and we've got a lot of work we do to keep Metra trains running on time in this corridor too, which then has a bit of a spillover effect on where trains can spot and move and be built in the yard and not. But all of that basically conversation was happening as part of the planning grant. So that's the good part of it, is the ramp up to that allowed us to really look at this systematically and say, let's take a holistic approach, looking at all the key stakeholders, all of our operations in the area. And also then once we've reached the limit of we can only do so much to tweak it, then making that known to Franklin Park, hey, we've kind of reached our ability to do things. And then through that letter of support that was mentioned, that's, I think, one of the key components that we tried to outline in that letter of support, was letting the FRA know that, hey, we're not sitting on the sidelines ignoring this issue. We've really done everything we can do from an operational standpoint. The only other thing that's left, the tool that's in the toolbox, is to do a grade separation for the area. And I think that also then allows FRA to prioritize those elements when they know that the railroad has really come to the table, done everything they can do to tweak their operations. And now the only thing that's left to do to have that full mitigation measure is to work towards a grade separation. The other part of it, I would say, is, and this is really the key part of the planning grant, and the main focus of this is talking about the RCE and the potential for a grade separation. But the other thing that we've really gotten out of it is those heart-to-heart, long, systematic conversations with Franklin Park has now branched off that we have 2 other major projects that we're considering partnering with Franklin Park on to further. One of them would be to further reduce pedestrian, public transit, and commuter traffic congestion in the area. And then the other one is really on the environmental sustainability front. And I can talk about the environmental sustainability one if you want, but the other one that's interesting is we now have a whole separate proposal that we're working on with Franklin Park to potentially reroute a road, to reroute some truck traffic out of the downtown area that would also then lessen the impact at one crossing, which then in turn could lead to Franklin Park being able to then close that crossing, which would have a huge safety and public benefit for us as well. Now, none of that is set in stone yet, but all of that resulted from all the conversations that we're having about the RCE. And so that's one of the things that's really exciting about, again, having that corridor approach, having that planning grant approach, is it really allows you to have that systematic analysis of the whole corridor. And then at least from the CPKC perspective, it allows us to bring forward some really holistic solutions for that. And I think that's also borne out, and obviously we're highlighting Franklin Park, and we all should through this, but we also had a lot of success with the city of Davenport, which is one of the other communities that got an RC grant application. Very similar process to everything that was laid out here. For the partnership, we were able to bridge with Davenport there as well. They got an actual construction grant, so they're working right now towards actually having a grade separation there. But that also is going to have some huge operational benefits for the railroad, in addition to the public safety benefits and the efficiency benefits for the community as a whole. So I think with that, I'll end there because I'm really interested in whatever questions or comments you might have. But that's, again, just thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about the partnership we developed here, and big praise for the FRA and what they're doing with the grant proposal. Thanks, Betsy.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we'll turn it to questions. I am seeing someone said that the Q&A feature is not working, but I do have a few questions in Q&A. So if you want to type your question to chat, that is A-okay. Okay, so I suppose for Santi or Jennifer, how recent does the feasibility study need to be?
Okay, so are you asking feasibility study for a potential grant, right? For a potential applicant coming in?
Yes, I assume that yes. That
Okay,
is-
so yeah, I'm gonna answer it in two ways. If they're looking to submit an application for planning because it is relatively old, I'm assuming just to do a hypothetical, 4 or 5 years or older, they'll have to probably do a refresh of it. But a feasibility study is a bit difficult because that's kind of early on in the project life cycle. So I'm not too sure what the ask is here. Are they looking at preliminary engineering? And if they're looking at maybe using some of the feasibility study that they've already done in the past, I'd say hypothetically, maybe 4 or 5 years or older would be a bit too old. They'd probably have to do a refresh at that point, but it's kind of hard to answer that question without knowing the specifics of the project. But that'd be kind of a ballpark answer. I don't know if anyone else from the panel here wants to weigh in as well.
Yeah, I could weigh in, being that we're going through the process right now. So yeah, the feasibility study was done in 2014, but we are having to do a bit of a refresh on that. I mean, it gave us some like design alternatives in terms of where, a grade separation could occur, but obviously we need newer traffic data and all of that type of stuff that's updated to today's environment. So that's kind of what we're going through right now, as we start preparing and going through the process in terms of planning and engineering in phase 1 and phase 2 design.
Great. That's helpful. I'm also seeing, thank you, FRA folks, for answering some of the questions in the chat. I've seen you've done a few of those so far. I'm going to ask about the emphasis on rural and tribal. And let's see, can you help us understand the cycle emphasis on rural and tribal? And I believe it's 20% of the funds.
Yeah, so exactly. So I'm going to reiterate that here again. 20% of the set aside for the entire program is for rural and tribal. And also, and this will help answer a couple more questions here. 20%, there's also 20% state cap, which is something like 220 million per state. So we have to take those two into context. So every state only can get 20% of the entire pot total, and also a 20% set aside for rural and tribal lands. So that kind of answers some of the questions as well on that. So it is not focused on that. It's 20% of it, but it is open to all types of different projects.
Great. Okay, here's a question I have gotten several times leading up to this webinar, and now I see a few people have thumbs upped it about quiet zones. Is this funding available to establish quiet zones, or how does that factor into the RCE program?
Yeah, I think quiet zone is a whole different, or we can do a whole different topic on that. Is not part of RCE. We do not, FRA does not have the, and Jennifer, please weigh in, because we just had a session about their safety as well. The authority to, how can I put this? To provide guidance on quiet zones, et cetera. But what they can do, like if local entities are interested in doing quiet zones, there is an entire process that they work with our safety team. And Betsy, maybe we can do a separate session on quiet zones differently, because there is a whole aspect that they work with our safety team specifically on quiet zones, and they would have to meet the threshold on the requirements on safety improvements for that grade crossing. And once that grade crossing meets that threshold, then they can be considered to be a quiet zone and they don't need to have those horns. But the caveat to that is the local entities that are making those improvements have to continue maintaining those improvements for the life of the crossing. Okay, that is the caveat here. So as soon as the class 1 or the operator deems that it's no longer safe because they didn't meet that threshold, whether it be barriers, et cetera, whatever is deemed by that crossing, then they can continue using the horns for the safety of the train. So that's what the caveat is. So the local entities that's making these improvements, they just have to know that they also have to maintain the safety of that. But I don't want to go more into that because we can do a whole different session on that, and we'd
Sure.
be great to have our safety. So Jennifer, do you want to also lean a bit more?
Yeah, I will just add, I totally agree. I think, my understanding is that there are measures that the local entity can take to get to a point, safety measures, supplemental and alternative measures that the local entity can undertake. And then at that point, they can come in and apply for quiet zone
Mhm.
funding. But they also, it's almost like they have to meet like a threshold to even get, some kind of quiet zone implementation. So again, I think, we have to have the right people in the room to answer that adequately. And
Yep.
again, and it is such a popular topic and question that, yeah, we could definitely do, 30 minutes on that at least, probably.
Well, we will keep that in mind. It's a good
Yeah.
idea. I don't know if there's a way for you all to provide your safety team contact info. It looks like someone's asked about that.
Yeah, we can give that on here, but there's information. And what I can do is I can give you that info later, Betsy, and we can distribute it to the whole team.
Sounds good. And I don't know if anyone had anything else to add, Larry, maybe about quiet zones or.
No, I think it's well worth doing a separate one on. So there's actually
Okay.
some other interesting things that on the state level for funding wise have been done with quiet zones. So that could be a good separate discussion.
Okay, thank you. Question for Nicholas or Jill, I guess. In Franklin, were the crossings eliminated, rail raised, tunneled, or a combination? What was the yeah.
So I can take, yeah, so our grant is for phase 1 and phase 2 design and engineering. So we haven't determined, what will be in place yet. We're envisioning probably a tunnel, but we still have to do kind of the study and effects and all of those types of things. So our award was for phase 1 and phase 2 design and engineering. So we did not get construction money as of yet.
A good reminder about those planning grants. Let's see, the scope seems to be for densely populated areas. Please correct if I have the wrong idea. And I know we mentioned the 20% set aside for rural, but other than that, would you agree that the densely populated areas are ideal applicants, I guess?
I'm going to go back to the information we provided earlier. So 20% set aside for rural and tribal, and the rest of it is pretty much open to anything. So it can be densely, it can be metropolitan, etc. But that doesn't mean that 20%. It's a minimum. Maybe we can give it a little bit more rural. It just depends on the application. So discretionary grant program, you guys are competing against each other, right? So
Yes. Here's a timing question. What's the time frame from when an application is made to finding out about the award?
yeah, and I think I provided the answer below. I did put the link of the most current publication, so the calendar. So for example, RCE is going to be published right now in June, mid to late June, but then the awards will not be coming out until the end of the year. So there's an entire first review of the applications and intake process. Then there's an actual teams that review all the applications, depending on how many we get. Then it goes through a senior review team, OST, etc. So by the time the awards come out, it's about December. But look at the publication. The key takeaways: look at the publication online. It shows you the calendar, and it'll show you when we're expecting to do the public announcements for each particular grant program.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think I'm seeing questions that are sort of reiterations of what we've already discussed, unless you all are looking at the chat and see other ones that we should address. And we are right at time, so I don't want to go over time too much. Is there anything else you all would want to add? as a reminder, we'll send out the recording of the webinar along with the slides and any other pertinent information that we all discussed to all of the registered attendees. And I'm happy to follow up with questions if you have them. So I guess, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for attending, and have a good rest of the week.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Bye,
you all.
thank you.
Appreciate it.